On June 23rd of 2000, a 50-year-old mother disappeared under suspicious circumstances. But when it was discovered exactly what happened to her and why, the people behind it were in for a rude awakening. This is the case of Linda Pedroza. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also sledding in a Santa suit. Whee! But anyway, today we're going over the case of a girl who was willing to do whatever it took for the sake of love, even if it meant committing the most evil crime imaginable. Linda Pedroza was born on January 18th of 1983 in Palm Beach County, Florida. As a child, Linda was her mother's little helper. Every day she would cook, clean, take care of the family's pets, and perform chores like mowing the lawn. Naturally, Linda's mom, Isabel, adored her daughter and took a lot of pride in having such a hard-working little girl. But as little Linda grew up, things quickly began to change. In middle school, she was introduced to boys and alcohol and hormones, and her behavior became rebellious. Soon, she was running away from home, using illegal substances, and having boys in the home without her parents knowing. As a result, her mother Isabel, who saw her perfect little girl turning into something much different, suddenly panicked and tried to overcorrect. Isabel's solution was to take her daughter out of public school and place her into an expensive private school. However, when Isabel caught Linda at home, still hanging out with boys and still taking, the next step was trying to homeschool her. But once again, that didn't work either. So next, she tried taking her daughter to work with her, and yet again, that wasn't a viable solution. Over time, the relationship between mother and daughter eroded even further. On more than one occasion, police were called to the Pedroza house because of Linda and Isabel's constant fighting. Additionally, Linda's father, Miguel, who was an alcoholic, soon wound up in prison for assaulting his daughter. So by then, Linda had a mother she hated and resented and no father figure. Naturally, this was a recipe for disaster. At age 17, Linda began dating a 23-year-old man by the name of Antoine Wright. For a short period, Isabel adored her daughter's new boyfriend, but then one day, she caught the pair naked together in bed. From that point forward, her opinion of him changed. Now, Isabel was accused of making insulting and even derogatory remarks towards Antoine. She despised him and demanded Linda break up with him, but Linda refused. Instead, Linda continued seeing Antoine whenever she got the opportunity. When the pair were together, Antoine and Linda fed into each other's worst impulses. Before long, their relationship became an off-brand version of Romeo and Juliet. If they couldn't be together, then they would be better off dead or in prison. No one, not even their closest family members, could get in the way of their little love story, including Linda's own mother, Isabel. But exactly how could they deal with her? That was a question they really didn't have a good answer to. And when they finally did have an answer, it was going to be a traumatic event for the entire community. Speaking of traumatic events, not too long ago, I was sitting here writing a script when all of a sudden, I got a text message that said my mother was in a car accident. Immediately, I left the house and I rushed to the scene, and I was one of the first people there because it was only like 2 minutes away. I parked and then ran there as fast as I could, and thankfully my mom was okay, though a bit disoriented and on a stretcher, but her car was completely totaled. Following a trip to the hospital, it was discovered that she broke her wrist and she also broke her knee, so she now needed surgery. Luckily, she's doing better, but one of the best things that she did was to get legal representation, as that got her a very large payday. Morgan & Morgan, today's sponsor, just so happens to be America's biggest law firm. In just the past few months, they've helped clients receive enormous payouts. In September of 2023, in Pennsylvania, a client received a $26.2 million payout, which was 18 times what their insurance was offering. In December of 2023, in the state of Florida, a person was in a life-altering car crash and got offered $350,000 from their insurance. Well, this person decided to check out Morgan & Morgan, and they helped them to get $12.2 million. Yes, dollars. A lot of companies will not try their hardest, but this firm will go above and beyond for you. They will do their best to get you the biggest possible award. With Morgan & Morgan, you'll feel good knowing that you have the best possible team on your side, as they have over 4,000 available staff to assist you whenever. It takes practically no time for them to see if they can take your case, and there is zero fees unless you win. Yes, zero fees. With 8 clicks or less, you can submit your claim to Morgan & Morgan through the link in my description or by dialing pound 529. On June 27th of 2000, Linda Pedroza reported her mother missing to the police. According to Linda, she hadn't seen her mother Isabel in several days, and the last thing she heard, she was taking a plane to Texas. About a week later, on the 4th of July, a body was discovered in a wooded area in the acreage. The body was missing flesh from the head and neck area and basically unidentifiable. One of the key pieces of evidence, though, was a piece of jewelry worn around the neck. The authorities worked with local media to get the word out to see if anyone had any idea who it may have belonged to. Shortly afterwards, a person called the local police claiming that they suspected it may be their co-workers. According to the woman, her and her co-worker made the necklaces together at work. She said her co-worker's name was Isabel Pedroza, a 50-year-old tax preparer. Meanwhile, based on the location and condition of Isabel's body, crime scene investigators were able to make a few assumptions. One was that considering how far Isabel's body was from the roadway, aka not that far at all, whoever was responsible probably wasn't very experienced. Because if they were, they likely would have placed her body further in the woods. On a similar note, Isabel's body was found to still be wearing her sports bra, jewelry, and some of her clothes. Now, if the perpetrator was a more experienced criminal, they likely would have at least thought to remove all of these items before placing the body in the woods. Instead, they didn't. Therefore, it was likely fair to assume that whoever did this was a first-time offender. Additionally, right next to the wooded area was a housing complex. Not exactly a good location to place a dead body. But once the investigators began contacting Isabel's family and potential suspects, the investigation on the ground continued. Only a few days after discovering Isabel's body, police found her vehicle parked in the parking lot of the Palm Beach County Airport. However, when they began to search inside of the car, they found another series of suspicious clues. First, they noticed that the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, with the back of the seat being tilted way down. Now, evidently, Isabella was a relatively tiny woman, so this didn't make any sense. In fact, in this position, she likely wouldn't have even been able to reach the pedals, meaning that the driver of the car not only wasn't her, but was someone much taller than she was. Quickly, it set into investigators that Isabel's car being at the airport was actually a staged event. And this was even further corroborated by something else they found: fingerprints. There were fingerprints all over the place, on the shift lever, the rear view mirror, the back window, and a pillar post. Yet again, more evidence that the perpetrator of the crime didn't exactly think everything through that well. Anyway, a few days after finding Isabel's car, police received a bizarre tip from one of the people who lived in the housing complex near where Isabel was found. According to this person, they had seen a black truck chasing a woman down on that same road around the same time of Isabel's discovery. Now, this was bizarre because why would the perpetrator return to the scene of the crime despite the risk of potentially attracting more attention to this area? As it turned out, they soon learned that that tip was a dud and completely unconnected to the case. It was just a husband who got angry at his wife. However, a new lead arose when the fingerprints found in Isabel's vehicle were found to match someone in the database. It was a convicted felon with the last name of Thompson. Thompson was out on bail and had a rap sheet that included robbery with a deadly weapon. Therefore, the first question that arose, of course, was whether or not Thompson had robbed and murdered Isabel. This was a natural conclusion to make, considering the facts. But upon interviewing Thompson, he claimed something much different than this speculation. Instead, he said that yes, he was responsible for driving Isabel's car to the airport. He was actually asked to do so by none other than Antoine Wright and Linda Pedroza. According to Thompson, neither one of them could drive a stick shift, so they needed his assistance. And when police interrogated Thompson about Isabel's murder, he said he had nothing to do with it, which seemed pretty believable actually, considering he didn't make any attempts to remove his fingerprints from the vehicle. As a hardened criminal, he was definitely the type who would have taken that next step. But anyway, now the magnifying lens moved on to Antoine and Linda. Evidently, by this point, police had already questioned Linda about what she knew about her mother's death, but she had only provided them with a bit of info. According to Linda, she assumed her mother had fled to Texas to get away from her. She also said she had no idea who would want to kill her or why. But now investigators were about to pay Linda another visit. On this second visit, they knocked on the door, and after Linda welcomed them in, she sat down to talk with the detectives. Once again, Linda repeated a similar story to what she had already told them. She said that on the evening of June 24th, Isabel informed Linda that she was meeting with a client. Shortly after that, she was picked up by someone in a black car. Then, less than a day later, she and Linda got into a really bad fight, and following this, Isabel packed up her bags and told her daughter she just couldn't take it anymore. She said that she was going to Texas to stay with Linda's stepbrother. According to Linda, this wasn't the first time Isabel had left like this. But after 2 days of Isabel not showing up for work, coming home, or even showing up in Texas, Linda found it necessary to report her missing. Unsurprisingly, detectives had a hard time believing Linda's story. Before long, they asked her if they could take a quick look through the house. Linda willingly agreed, and upon doing a pretty detailed search, nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. In fact, the house was pretty clean. But as they were getting ready to leave, the detectives noticed something a bit strange: a broken lamp in the corner of the room. Now, one thing investigators found near Linda's body that we didn't mention earlier was a broken electrical cord. The electrical cord was actually found underneath or around Isabel's neck area. So after detectives spotted a broken lamp, that immediately rang some alarm bells. Now they started taking a closer look at everything. In no time, they found another odd clue, a wall that appeared to have been freshly painted. The next step was to spray luminol on it. As we've discussed in prior videos, luminol is that spray that makes blood light up blue on otherwise clean-looking surfaces. When the detectives sprayed this chemical in the room, it revealed a horrific canvas of blood splatter all over the place. At that point, detectives were certain that this was the room Isabel was murdered in. However, they still had yet to prove who was responsible. The next step was for investigators to contact Thompson again, the guy that drove Isabel's car to the airport. In turn, Thompson called a few friends and they corroborated his story about being told to drive the car by Antoine and Linda. Despite this, Linda still refused to confess to the murder. Instead, she stuck to her story. Meanwhile, Antoine, on the other hand, was not going to be as persistent. Once detectives finally got around to interviewing him, he gave out almost immediately. According to Antoine, he and Linda had been hatching a plot to murder Isabel for a while. First, they discussed the idea of using poison, but decided against it. Then they moved on to possibly using a gun. Problem with this, of course, was that despite stealing $100 from her mother to buy ammunition, Linda wound up buying the wrong size bullets for Antoine's gun. Finally, they decided to go with the method that was used in a story Linda's mother told her when she was younger. The story involved one of their relatives. Evidently, the woman was killed years ago by a cheating husband who got her pregnant and whisked her off to Tennessee. Linda's mother always claimed that the husband doused the woman's body in acid to hide the crime. So the plan Linda and Antoine hatched became very simple. First, they would kill Isabel. Then they would douse her body in acid to hide the crime. And then they would make it look like she ran away to Texas. The following is what actually happened the night of Isabel Pedroza's murder. On the evening of June 23rd of 2000, Linda Pedroza and Antoine Wright waited at the Pedroza family home for Isabel to return home from work. When she got home, Antoine quickly ambushed her and hit her in the head with a frying pan. Evidently, he hit her so hard that the handle broke. But after putting Isabel in a bit of a daze, Antoine and Linda then proceeded to strangle her using an electrical cord attached to a lamp they both pulled on each end until Isabel died from asphyxiation. Now, the problem became what to do with her body. The next step was to place Isabel's body in an acid-filled bathtub. Once that was accomplished, the pair took Isabel, placed her in their own vehicle, and drove to a wooded area. Here they placed Isabel's body in the woods. The two of them had officially followed through with their evil plan. But now that that was finished, they had to celebrate. After getting rid of Isabel, they used some of the $8,000 they had stolen from her trunk to have a nice dinner at Denny's. The next several days were filled with even more elaborate celebrations. First, they both got tattoos with each other's names on their chests. Then they bought a fancy new car with gold rims and bought new clothes. After that, they spent the entire week partying. Linda even paid for her and her friends to have their belly buttons pierced. Meanwhile, they had also gotten into contact with the convicted felon, Thompson, and had him drive Isabel's car to the airport. Additionally, they had cleaned up the house and spray painted the walls of the room Isabel was murdered in. As far as Linda and Antoine were concerned, they had covered all of their bases. But in reality, they had done a really poor, mediocre job. And because of that, after Antoine confessed to the police, both he and Linda were placed under arrest and charged with first-degree murder. While sitting in jail, however, their pathetic criminal love story continued. In fact, the pair even exchanged letters. In the letter, Antoine professed his love for Linda and attempted to get her to change her story so that it no longer implicated her. As long as you keep the same story you have now, I can't help you, and I'm not going to allow you to lay down, Antoine Wright wrote in a September 11th letter. If you change your story, believe it or not, we both can go home. He claimed that he had friends who could help the pair come up with an alibi. But once the futility of it all finally settled in, though, Antoine was the one who ultimately betrayed Linda. Once their trial rolled around, he wound up agreeing to testify against Linda in exchange for a shorter sentence. So in the end, Linda Pedroza was sentenced to 40 years in prison, while Antoine Wright was given a total of 20 years. He has since been released from prison. What happened to Isabel Pedroza was far more of a tragedy than the failed ending of a Romeo and Juliet plot. Isabel was a genuinely good mother who was just looking out for her daughter. Most teens go through a rebellious phase, and while it can be challenging for parents, it's something that can be overcome. In this case, though, the hatred had just boiled over too much. Linda's relationship with her mother was like a car driving over a cliff. Eventually, the car crashes and everyone in it either dies or gets severely injured. That's what happened here. What Linda and Antoine did to Isabel was indescribably horrific, and I hope Isabel is resting peacefully. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please like and subscribe because it's all we do. I also have an all-exclusive Patreon if you're interested in that. There's a bunch of tiers to choose from, and the third one allows for you to see a Patreon-only video, and that tier and the second one allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.